Hello, welcome to Baltic World, the premier channel discussing news and important issues facing Northern, Central and Eastern Europe. My name is Crispin, and today I've got a remarkable story for you involving the border between Belarus and Poland and Belarus and Lithuania. Before we get into it, a couple of housekeeping things. We have recorded the first book club, the Baltic Book Club, and it is on The Witcher. So that'll be coming out soon. Keep in tune for that. Thank you very much for those that have signed up for Patreon. That is like beyond our wildest expectation. We will leave a link down below. Also, like and subscribe, and most of all, share these videos if you want to help us promote the Baltic issues to the wider world. Now, this story begins in Canada, and it involves a woman called Nadia Murad. Now, if you don't know the name, she is a remarkable young woman, a Nobel Prize laureate, and hers is a story of heroism and survival. At the age of 14, she was captured by ISIS and sold into sexual slavery. She survived, has written a book, gone around the world talking about the real dangers of Islamic extremism, and she was due to give a speech on her book launch in Canada. Now, I'm going to start with this story. It will make sense, so bear with me. This is from the Daily Mail, and it's titled, "Canadian School Cancels Event with ISIS Survivor Nadia Murad because her harrowing description of torture and rape would be offensive to Muslims and foster Islamophobia." This is clown world. It is beyond the pale. We've got someone who has got a real life trauma to tell. She is a genuine refugee and a great spokesperson for the dangers of regressive extremism and the comparative, I think, superiority of Western liberal values. But because she has something that is truthful to say, it might make the Islamic extremists feel bad, and therefore she has been deplatformed for that purpose. Now, I'm not a big, warrior in the culture wars. I'm here to kind of report, but it really makes you think. Anyway, we'll continue. A Canadian school has cancelled an event with ISIS survivor Nadia Murad, saying her visit would be offensive to Muslims and foster Islamophobia. Murad was scheduled to sit down with students from the Toronto District School Board, the largest school board in Canada with nearly 600 schools, to discuss her book, The Last Girl, My Story of Captivity, in February 2022. Murad's graphic expose detailed how she escaped the Islamic State, where she was ripped from her home and sold into sexual slavery aged just 14 years old, according to The Telegraph. She uses the book to talk about how she was raped and tortured before finding her way to a refugee camp in Derhouk in northern Iraq, and then to Germany, where she now lives. But before the event could happen, the superintendent of the board, Helen Fisher, said that her students would not participate. She has since issued an apology but refused to allow her students to attend. Fisher expressed that she believed the book would promote Islamophobia and cited how offensive the book was to her Muslim students as her reason for cancelling the event. Now, Nadia Murad is a hero to many Muslims. ISIS doesn't represent Muslims around the world, and Nadia is an inspiration particularly for young Islamic women, many of whom want to escape the medievalist approach to marriage and bigamy and so forth. So to say it's offensive to Muslim students, no, it might be offensive to people that are extremists and violent, but certainly not to people like Nadia, who is herself, of course, a Muslim. So the school board has, after an enormous global worldwide backlash, has started to walk it back, but they still haven't hosted the event as far as I am aware. But we can see, the self-hatred that exists in many Western cultural institutions, the sense that, we are morally so much more reprehensible than everywhere else in the world. Remembering that ISIS, publicly executed people from Iran in the most horrific ways, put them in cages and drown them, set them on fire. We had those Western journalists personally beheaded, the most absolutely evil forms of torture and cruelty that we have ever seen in the modern age. And we have a survivor of this experience telling her story to the wider world. But because, you would make bad people and evil people feel bad, she's not allowed to do that in the West. Anyway, so what does this have to do with the border with the European Union? This is from LRT English, and it's titled Nobel Laureate Murad asks Lithuania to give asylum to Yazidi refugees. Nobel Peace Prize winner Nadia Murad has asked Lithuania and other European countries to provide safety to, quote, hundreds of Yazidis stranded on the EU border with Belarus and make it possible for them to apply for asylum. Quote, there are hundreds of Yazidis on the border or in the camps, Murad told reporters in Vilnius on Monday after meeting with Prime Minister Ingrida Simonaite. Those who are trying to find asylum should be helped to find a safe and legal way to get that asylum and not fall victim to traffickers again, she said. According to Murad, an Iraqi Yazidi human rights activist, the Yazidis stranded on Belarus's border are genocide victims and have lost their families and homes in Iraq. It is dangerous for the Yazidis to return to Iraq, she said. Yazidis are a Kurdish-speaking ethno-religious group mostly concentrated in northern Iraq. Iraqi citizens are the largest group among the migrants who have crossed or attempted to cross into Lithuania, Poland, or Latvia. In Belarus, they said. I will leave it there. One of the things that we should discuss is what happens, or what should happen, when someone of enormous moral authority requests something. I think of the case of Napoleon, a couple hundred years ago, when Edward Jenner, the creator of the first ever vaccine, he created the smallpox vaccine, and he asked Napoleon in a letter, because Edward Jenner was British, asked Napoleon to release some POWs that he personally knew. And Napoleon responded that he couldn't refuse the greatest benefactor of mankind, and he immediately released them with safe conduct back home. Now, was it in the interests of Napoleon to release these prisoners? No, they were actually quite high value. They were accused of spying. They had all kinds of knowledge about, French troop movements. And yet he did it anyway because of the moral authority of the person making the request. The same can be said for Nadia Murad. She is someone who is a genuine refugee, a true inspiration to others. Her personal story is one of just abject horror, but also hope and humanity. And she is a great spokesperson, not only for women, not only for survivors of persecution, but also the Yazidi people. And for her to stand up and say, look, I really want you to let these Yazidis in to the European Union. Yes, I know that they're political pawns and that this is part of Lukashenko's, hybrid conflict and so forth, but these people are genuine refugees and they deserve peace and security. How should the West respond? And I think that we can't just be dismissive. Does it mean that we have to be persuaded? No, I don't think so. And I have a different view than Nadia Murad on this, but she can't be ignored. And so what is the solution that I personally would recommend? Say, look, we will bring in Yazidis to the European Union, but not from the Belarus border. We will go to the camps in northern Iraq, in other places, like the places where Nadia Murad herself was processed, and find young women, more Nadia Murads, and say, look, you have escaped absolute trauma, and we will bring you to the European Union and Australia and the North America, provide a home for you where you can live out your life in peace and security and make a positive contribution to our Western way of life, much like Nadia Murad herself has done. But we won't allow people who have been dumped on the Belarusian border to cross into the European Union. Why be so harsh? Well, the answer is that if we allow the people who are Yazidis on the Belarusian border, some of whom may well be legitimate refugees, if we let them in, then every person on that border is going to claim to be a Yazidi. 100% that will happen. And then Lukashenko will know his way into the European Union. He'll see the chink in the armor and he will go out to Iraq, he'll go out to other parts of the Middle East and fly in people into Minsk specifically who are Yazidi. And at what point do you then say no? You've got Nadia Murad, you've got other figures saying, look, these Yazidis deserve to be led into the European Union. They suffered massive persecution under Saddam Hussein, then under ISIS. They suffered persecution under Erdogan of Turkey. and thus should they all be let in? Of course, that is beyond the capability of the European Union to absorb. The Kurds are the largest ethnic minority basically in the world that doesn't have its own state. And so if you let people of these sort of Kurdic minorities in, then you're going to be absolutely flooded. What should be done is that the European Union as a whole proactively goes out to these camps, finds the people who have been processed and confirmed as Yazidi refugees, bring them in as young women, bring them in as families, and allow them to be resettled in the West. That is the solution. And I think that is the way that we should answer Nadia Murad's plea. We should say, look, actually we will bring in more Yazidis, because she is someone of great moral authority. And to be honest, we really should be embarrassing Canada and others that seek to deny her a platform to speak because she is talking about things that others consider to be Islamophobic, even though they just happen to be truthful. And she's having honest conversations about what it means to be living under a theocracy when it's governed by Sharia. So I'm not, trying to drum up any kind of anti-Islamic sentiment either. Nadia Murad is one of my great heroes. She is a Muslim herself. In fact, today, as I'm recording this, another great Muslim hero of mine, Enes Kanter, the great NBA basketball player of the Boston Celtics, he has today achieved his American citizenship, changing his last name to Freedom. He's now Enes Kanter Freedom. His jersey will have freedom on it. So I will make sure I get myself one and wear it for you at some point. And he, of course, is a Muslim himself. He is a Turkish dissident, enemy of Erdogan, and outspoken critic of the Chinese Communist Party, unlike many other NBA basketball players who kowtow before President Xi and indeed the NBA as a whole. So Enes Kanter is a true hero, Enes Freedom, I should now say. And so there are plenty of Muslims out there that yearn for the liberty of the West. So the kind of moral of this video is that if someone of great moral authority asks for something that you don't want to give, we should at least, as noble beings, try and find a compromise. And I'll leave you with this cool story from the 1960s, the Vatican. So there was a young Swiss guardsman who wanted to get married. He was just a private. And they had a rule that you had to be a corporal to get married in the Swiss Guards because they had to have an apartment to live with their wife, whereas privates could only live in the barracks. Anyway, he appealed this refusal right up to the Pope, John the 23rd. And the Pope said, let the kid get married. And they said, but Your Holiness, he can't get married. He's not a corporal. And he's like, Supreme Pontiff, absolute monarch, ruler of the Holy See, this young man can get married. So guess what happened? He was made a corporal. Thank you very much. I will see you next time. Goodbye.